Kick the Stigma actually started a few years ago when I was fortunate enough to run a barbershop in West London.
Tell me about the biggest challenge that you faced when running that barbershop.
Just finding the barbers that fit the culture you want to build. I want to be a global brand.
And it's nice to see that you have a mission and thus you build a business around it, which is amazing and honestly, nice work. And
Thank you.
Keep up with that.
The plan is, first off, just build the brand. Get the story out there. Get the products out there. I think that, you know, when you're hungry and you're ambitious, and you can feel like you're always behind. I think that was the thing, like you always feel like you're behind, and maybe there's people in your circle or people, you know, a bit older who have done some incredible things. You go, oh, that's not me. I think I definitely fell into that trap, but it wasn't in a bad way. It fueled me to do more. Regret is worse than risk. No one's going to be perfect, and you should strive for high standards, but never perfection if it's going to get in the way. But practice makes permanent. The more you do it, the better you get.
Thank you for coming on this show, Adam, and it's a pleasure to have you here. What I want to do essentially, get to know you a bit more, and then I want to talk a lot about the brand that you have launched and what the reason why you have launched it. So if you just want to tell us a little bit about what is it that you do and how you got here.
Yeah, brilliant. Nice to meet you, Hamza. So I'm Adam. I'm the founder of Kick the Stigma, a male grooming brand that's on a mission to support men's mental health in the UK.
Amazing. So, you know, when you say mental health, so define that a bit more, especially if men's mental health, because I don't think that's a topic that's talked much about.
No, definitely. And I think it's certainly a conversation that's coming to light. We're raising more awareness in different areas. But for me, it's a case of it's how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? How do you feel when you go to bed? It's like, it is what it says on the tin. It's a state of mind. And I think that a stat came out that 95% of men said that their mental health is just as important as their physical health. And things like the gym do help, but I think what's really important is actually we're just moving towards, as a society, one, the awareness piece, which is great, but also thinking about, okay, how do you support people that may be going through a tough time? Whether that's creating a safe space for them. I think just being able to be a bit more empathetic, be a bit more compassionate towards people, towards some men, particularly in the male-dominated industries. I think construction's probably one of the biggest ones that I'm seeing at the moment, that those companies really do care about their employees and they want to find ways to support them from a mental health perspective. So I think it's a really important cause. It's certainly something that needs more attention, but it's a rising tide. We're getting there.
So, you know, when we talk about mental health, one of the biggest questions that kind of raises is there's a very thin line, at least from my opinion, between people using the right spaces the correct way and somewhat abusing them as well. So there's a lot of the times I seen in individuals that don't necessarily feel in a certain way or don't necessarily have any, mental health problems that are potentially going on in their life, but they still utilize the system to say that, okay, yeah, you know what, mentally I'm having a mental breakdown, or this is happening, that's happening. How do you, especially in 2026, I don't know, is a hard topic to discuss, but how do you actually differentiate the two individuals or the two people?
I think it's that classic adage of one rotten apple spoils the bunch. I think that a lot of people you should always take it seriously. Firstly, if someone says they're going through something like that, the worst thing you could do is to just say they're faking it, they're lying. You're right. We all make different judgments because I think we all handle things differently. Like what some people find really tough, some people find like that's nothing. You know, especially when it comes to adversity. When someone maybe has, I don't know, fallen and just breaks their foot or their ankle, that could be a really tough situation for someone. Other people might be, oh, I've broken many bones in my life. It'll be 3 months, you'll be on the road to recovery. But I think it's about the approach that other people take. Like you have to take it seriously and not be clouded by that judgment. Because you're right, like anything in life, there's always people that are going to look to use whatever they can as an advantage. And ultimately, that's just the nature of anything, right? There's always someone trying to scam something, and I think the worst thing to do would be to make assumptions that that's what someone's doing. You're right. There's certainly an element of like, it depends where you are as well, the context. If it's the workplace, there's policies involved. There's far more probably a process driven approach that people take. But when it comes to like friends and a friendship group, or maybe it's just a community group, a lot of the time I really doubt someone would use it for their advantage, right? And I think just give them that safe space, be compassionate, and see where it takes the conversation. And then again, you make the judgment about how you spend your time with that person. Do you want to spend the time and energy supporting them? If if you think they're lying, then you probably won't. And that's your call.
Yeah. I mean, you know what I find the hardest is, for example, with my mates,
Yeah.
we honestly, somebody would fall out from a bike or anything would happen, we just laugh at it. Like
Yeah.
that's what that natural reaction would be. But I do see people taking it to an extent where, trying to take the friendship, I don't know, like, the friendship circles, I don't know what would be the correct term for it. Like, I personally would, if my best friend would fall from the chair, I wouldn't really necessarily help me. I'd just laugh at it.
Yeah.
And people take it the wrong way as well, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
And the mental health element of it, we have seen that. Like, whenever the group grows, or whenever there's a bigger group, there's always the conversation that comes up. But between us guys, most of the time, it's just a laugh and a banter.
Yeah.
And I feel like with what you're saying as well, and what my experience is with it, is giving the safe space at the right time might be the thing, as comparison to when people try to make everything about the mental health. Like, if you laugh at someone just because of a certain way, you might have a different relationship or different reaction to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking or you're making fun of that person for whatever they are going through.
Yeah.
That thin line, how do you actually, like, what's the definition of it? Or
Well, I think that's the thing. There isn't a one definition, right? Like, your group, I know my friendship group, and we rip each other all the time, particularly because I'm an Arsenal fan, so I've had a lot of stick for a lot of years, and now we've won the league. But it's like, your own group and your own friends, and I think there would be a time when you would pick up on things.
Yeah,
and I think that's what I talk about, the awareness. Like, that if someone did something, you could make a laugh and a joke and literally carry it on the whole night, and they'd laugh along. There's other people that, if it happened, if you make one joke about it, they're going to get into a mood, maybe throw a tantrum, and you go. So I think it's just, again, it's not to have that one definitive answer. It's just trust your instincts on how you think you should deal with it, and just having that awareness, and again, that compassionate element that, okay, that person's not responded their usual way, maybe not in the group setting, I'll just send them a text and see, if there's something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. And it kind of clears out everything that goes around it. Yeah. So talking about mental health, and obviously you mentioned your brand, what inspired you to actually start the Kick the Stigma?
Kick the Stigma actually started a few years ago when I was fortunate enough to run a barbershop in West London. And my boss walked into the office one day. He said he'd bought his local barbershop. Does anyone want to run it? And I was 24, 25. I'd seen him do the leadership piece. I was saying he's an executive coach, so I've seen what leadership looks like in the boardroom, in the C-suite, and I thought I can take elements of that. And now let's see if I can build a brand and build a business. And from scratch, I was fortunate that he gave me the leeway in quite a low risk environment to go and do it. And not being a barber, not being able to cut hair, not knowing anything about the industry or even the area, it was a real interesting journey of discovery, and then again, challenges and overcoming it. So for me, it was a case of going to the shop, and immediately you see there's 4 within a 3-minute walking radius. So competition's high, all fairly low priced. And you're asking yourself, how do we differentiate? Like, if this is the area, it's highly competitive, it's price sensitive, how are we going to stand out in this market? But what I've noticed is a lot of the shops were catering to a different niche demographic in the community. So it might be Kurdish, it might be Eritrean, Somalian, like that. They had their core group, and it would work for them, right? Because the head barber is probably the owner, and they just need to make a living, and it works. But for me, I mean, commercially, number one, being able to include the whole community, all hair types, all ethnicities, all races, all face, you've captured a bigger market if you can get it right. So it started from our differentiation point started from that values-based approach and going for that inclusion. And therefore, how do you attract those different types of people? You need to reflect that. So getting barbers that represent different ethnicities that can cut different hair types, right? Like my assumption that a barber can just cut hair. Afro hair is very different to Asian hair. It's very different to European hair. And so finding that was quite tough. But once we got the mix right, it was working. Then you take on language, because we actually found that the area transformed a lot over the years. And we went to secondary school to do a partnership with them in our kind of outreach to the community. And the teacher told us 80% of the students were Muslim. So immediately you've got a school of 1,600 students, and you get that fact. Immediately I was like, we need to embrace Arabic, because that for them would be a representation that our shop is potentially includes them, is thinking consciously about them. So anyway, so we were building that out. And we'd invited a counsellor down, James, and he was on his political journey, and he's a really phenomenal guy. Like, he was really, really passionate. And he's mixed raced, and so he was talking about his own experience in a barbershop, not feeling quite comfortable in that some of the European barbershops couldn't cut his hair properly. So he'd have to go to the black barbershops, but sometimes he wouldn't feel quite comfortable with maybe the way they were talking or just the general atmosphere. So when we kind of came along at the right time. And then he told us that the council's really keen to push this mental health initiative, and they've got something called Trim Talk, and do we want to be involved? And for me, it was the perfect fit. It was all around training barbers to be mental health first aiders. And again, for a lot of the time, we talk about a woman's relationship with a hairdresser, and we can generalize, but we know it's roughly, you walk in, you feel quite safe, you're going to get your hair done and look better. You have a gossip, you put the world to rights for the 3 hours, and then you leave. And it's really nice, and you usually have a good experience. And now it's coming to light that men have the same relationship with their barbers. So that was the atmosphere we were trying to go to. But obviously with the mental health focus, it's just helping the barber not rely on their personality alone. So they actually have some education to maybe spot signs if they're not sure what to do, and signpost. So when this conversation was going about, and then the BBC picked up on it a year later, which was fantastic. Like, to be able to be involved with that was a great experience. The radio, the TV, it was great coverage for us. But it also, again, was part of what we're talking about with raising awareness on the whole mental health aspect and how barbers can be a safe space. But where I was always asking myself the question of what more can we do? So with the barbershop, we reached out to our local mine charity and started a football tournament called Kick the Stigma. And it's the play on words, but we reached out to local businesses. We said, you got to donate to play. And we've raised about £4,000 for that mine charity in two football tournaments. So that was great. But again, it's an annual tournament. I was asking myself again, what do we do? How do we have more impact? How do we really support this cause and walk the walk, not just talk about it? And that's what led to Kick the Stigma of the hair products, because it's that daily grooming routine that every man goes through to look better and feel better. When you wake up in the morning, and no matter how you feel, you've got to get ready for the day. You've got to mentally prepare for the day. And usually you style your hair. So I felt there was an opportunity in a high growth market when it comes to men's grooming to be a business that has high impact as well. So putting the two together from the experience of the barbershop and plugging that gap in between haircuts, and then thinking about what we can do to actually raise awareness and drive the mission, if you like, has led us to Kick the Stigma.
Amazing. That's such a nice way to put it. And yeah, you're right. Like, we, as you said, we normally generalize it that women go to their hairdresser and, they gossip and they talk about all sorts of stuff for 4 hours. But as men, when I'm sitting with my barber, I would talk to him like he would most likely remember what the last conversation that we had. And that conversation helps you to get out from the zone or get out from the routine. And then it gets you get back into the game again or get you going again for the next 2 or 3 weeks until you see him again. And it's a nice way to put it. And I'm definitely sure that people obviously will start, man, especially for start with their hair in the morning.
Yeah,
So they'll definitely go through that. That's nice. So tell me, why mental health? Like, there are a lot of other missions as well, but why did you specifically choose mental health?
I think when I was going through the barbershop experience, you start to become aware of the statistics, and I just didn't realise how bad they were. I think 600,000 men each year take their life in the UK. 34% of 18 to 24-year-olds are diagnosed with some form of mental health condition. And all the whole narrative, the whole conversation was quite negative. And for me, I always thought that if we're really going to affect change and raise awareness, we've got to do it with a positive narrative. So I was thinking about it, and obviously mental health, it was important because I'd seen what it meant to the men with the barbers, and I saw what it meant to the community when we're doing conferences and outreach, and they talk about how they're really pleased to see us taking the conversation forwards. And then you see the statistics, and I just thought that there is no leading voice. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work, particularly more people are speaking up about it and using their platform. But I just felt there's an opportunity to be a reminder, so in that daily grooming routine, to be a reminder that your mental health matters too, and just try and do something positive. Again, with the work we've done with Mind, I'd seen just how financially constrained they are each year. And for me, it was like, these are the people on the front line that are really helping those that struggle. So I wanted to build a business that was firstly a business, so not a charity, but can we do both? Can we be performance driven, purpose led? And I think those two things is kind of where business is at today. And I genuinely believe, like a lot of the companies that have social missions, should we say, will donate profit, like 10% of profit, 5% of profit. And when I was building it out and thinking about the business model and how do we build it sustainably, both financially and based on impact, I was thinking that, no, I want every product to make a difference. So I'm not donating profit. Profit's got far too many implicating factors, right? And especially when you're growing, you're not thinking about making a profit. So I wanted to say that if I sell 5 hair products or I sell 5 million hair products, I'm going to make a difference to someone's life. And obviously, how much we sell will affect how much we can have an impact, but that's where the core mission started. And I think that's what will hold us steady. And again, we'll see. But what's been nice is the feedback so far, both pre-launch and then since launching, has been really, really positive. And I think that we live in a place where, especially in the UK, where a lot of people like to talk about it or want to talk about it, but quite don't have the courage to go and step out and do it. And it takes a lot, I think, because you recognise that you're now putting yourself out publicly to support this and be a leading voice for others. But I think that's as much a privilege that it is a burden. You know, the running the business side and doing those elements, as you know, it comes with the territory. But when you get that first message of this really helped me, or I really like what you're doing and I'm supporting the cause, you know, I'm behind you, then it just fuels you to keep going. And I mean, actually, it's funny. We've had some female. I think like 35% of our customers are female, and I think that's just as big a point, because if we're going to get change, it takes everyone. Everyone can play a part, and so maybe those women have seen it as an opportunity to gift it to someone. Maybe they just thought it was a really good product and thought, I want to give it to my son or my husband or my partner. And so I think that was a really interesting statistic just off the bat. We're only 6 weeks in, but seeing that again, it starts to get you thinking about what's the strategic play, and how do you keep driving the mission forwards.
When you talked about statistics and you said about over 6,000 plus men take their life every year, why do you think the numbers are getting higher and higher? What's the main? Obviously, there must be some sort of a drive, like the numbers in man suicides and generally throughout the globe are much higher than the suicides in women, for example. What's your opinion? Why do you think that's the case?
That's a good question. I think, again, I'm not an expert, but you could probably look at the trends, and technology is playing a part, particularly in the younger generation, because the comparison's so easy. And I remember you'd be, 9 years old, and you go get your bike, knock around on the doors to see if your mates are coming out to play football and what have you. And now it's more likely they don't do that, and they're on either the PlayStation or on their phone. And I think, technology's got lots of positives, but that's probably a testament to it. But then you think about the older generation that are still suffering as well. It's a cultural thing, because you didn't talk, like, honestly, this wouldn't have been a business, I don't believe, 15 years ago. Because it just wasn't a conversation that people had or wanted to have. And even though you would struggle, you always got told that it's that stiff upper lip and carry on. And I think that the world's just started to change, and people come from a place where, again, vulnerability was seen as a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength. And it's how do you encourage that when someone's lived 40, 50 years thinking that they have to take everything on themselves and they can't talk to anyone and they have to put on a brave face for others. How do you then convince someone that actually, if you really open up and find a safe space, whatever that safe space is, maybe it is the barbers, just talk and open up, you can actually, offload some of that weight on your shoulders. I think, it's obviously a case-by-case basis, but I think that's what it probably comes down to. And financial stress, we talked about it, the state the country's in, cost of living's going up. It's not ideal, right? So there's a lot of different elements.
But why just the man then and not the woman as well? So the last conversation that I had with someone in this space, what their opinion was, they said that it's because men feel more responsible for driving the family or the family and overall the household, and because of that, and men are grown, or the society, man is looked as a man, like you're not supposed to be weak, which, talking about something like mental health, for example, or having a breakdown or not being as comfortable about a certain topic than as compared to somebody else, for example, it, as you said, is a sign of weakness, and men don't want to be seen as weak. How, now that leads to the next question which is, how does someone let that go and open up? Because it's much easier said than done. I do know people in certain situations, they are struggling. There's a lot that's going on. But I also know that if they open up, they might not be able to even survive what they're going through. So that balance is very hard. And as you said, I completely agree with that, which you have to balance it on case-by-case basis. And people just talking about it is a very hard topic. There's not really a right or wrong on it. There's a lot of opinions, or what works for me, as you said, it might not work for you, and vice versa. But the matter of the fact is, like, what I'm trying to get to is, what would be one piece of advice that you could give to someone to essentially that is trying to open up on how to open up, essentially, how you can help someone, considering that you have had some experience while you were at the barbershop?
I think
it's hard, isn't it? Like,
you think you just want to phrase it right. I think what a safe space feels like. I would say be empathetic and listen. Maybe not have solutions, just listen. But sometimes it takes you to be vulnerable to give someone else that courage. So if you think someone needs to open up or wants to open up, just being vulnerable first can make it a lot easier for them. And so if you can do that, then they're more likely to do it. And I think I'm really fortunate that, you know, my dad's been my role model. So, and he's always been, I guess, my outlet for a number of years. And it's great because he doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He just listens, and maybe he has suggestions, but it's nothing like concrete, and trust that I'll make the right choice. And actually, I think a lot of the time it is just about getting it off your chest, not necessarily like, for example, you run a business, right? So you know some of the pressures that you have, and ultimately you also know the book lies with you. You're the one that has to fix it. But sometimes you just might have a day where you want to talk to someone about it. You still know you're the one that has to fix it. They're not the one to fix it, but you just want to get it off your chest. So I think it's essentially comes down to that, like just having that, create that space, be vulnerable to get the vulnerability back, and then just listen.
But isn't it much harder if you're doing that with the space, for example, a comparison to, I don't know, maybe a friend circle? Like if I take myself as an example, again, I'm not expert at this, but I would speak to my mates about anything essentially. I just like chat about whatever. Would that be business? Would that be personal life? Would that be something that I'm randomly thinking? But I don't know if I would be able to speak to someone that I never met before the same way or open up as you say it.
Yeah.
So how do we go about making it so, when you talk about these safe spaces, for example, I know there's few organizations that are doing amazing work, and I have seen them genuinely saving lives of people's life. But what I find the hard is, if I'm not comfortable with it, there's definitely a lot more people that are genuinely not comfortable with doing that through an organization, for example, or a group. What do you think?
I think you take the pressure off it. And you're right. Sometimes it's I would also say, if you don't feel comfortable speaking to anyone in your close circle of friends or family, then you've got to probably make some changes, I would say, because I'm fortunate, and it sounds like you're the same way. You've got a group of friends and family that are just really supportive, and that makes a massive difference when you're doing things that are a bit risky and take courage and maybe aren't quite the norm. And knowing that you have their unconditional support and love is, honestly, it's so rare. I think that's the other point, that I know I'm fortunate. So it's, again, when people maybe don't feel that comfortable, it's not to make a quick judgment of, why don't you want to be more vulnerable, or this is a safe space, open up. You can't force it. But I think that if there really is, if no one's got no one to talk to, sometimes it is that stranger or that space that can make people feel comfortable, because in a way it's that, again, they know they're going into this without judgment, and it's also just taking the pressure off. Like, you don't have to talk. You think about the barbers as well. A lot of the time, it's that's why on the products we put words of encouragement, because I'm certainly not an expert, but the solution, I don't think, is deep therapeutic conversations for hours. I think it's just giving people a boost, giving people that positive nudge in the morning that, keep going, trust yourself, make them proud. That's for me, in my experience, that's all it's taken. And I think, you think about the conversation with the barbershop, maybe it's football, maybe it's lifestyle, maybe it's just something in current affairs, but the conversation is usually light. It's usually not too deep, but that still is what some people need. Some people just need that really enjoyable conversation that at the end of it, they'll walk away and not think too much about it, but they really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And yeah, it kind of answers the question that we were talking about earlier as well. I think the new generation is missing a lot of it, and purely obviously because of technology is playing a massive role in it. I know people would ask ChatGPT what to do as comparison to speaking to their
Yeah.
friends, unfortunately, but that's the society that we live in. And we don't talk about it much, and I do believe there's a lot more people that should be talking about it to raise the awareness to ensure that the next generation, the kids, understand that it's okay to ask that question to their parents or their friends or family or circle, and not just having to rely on whatever the ChatGPT or the technology or a random internet person without any clue is saying.
Yeah, it's like, that guy that apparently ChatGPT convinced him he was Justin Bieber. So he quit his job and thought he was going on to a concert, like to do a tour. Like that like that is just one of those situations where,
It's sad, but we kind of got to it. And I remember our times, as you said, if we were younger, we would go to their mate's house in the cycle in the bike essentially, and like knock on the door, or let's go to the park, let's play football or play anything else, like just go out essentially. And I don't see kids out as much as
no.
we were out. Like we just wanted an excuse to be out at the park and just mess about.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point, because ultimately we're not going to roll back the clock. I think one of the things is to accept the fact that this is the world today. It's like with AI, you could be stubborn about it and get left behind, or you can try and embrace it. And I think that's why it's so tough. That's why this is such a complex issue. But that's why I also think raising awareness is key and crucial to that conversation, because ultimately people are still going to engage with one another, and I think that it's a really like human connection, like being curious about each other, whether that's through podcasts now as opposed to the water cooler or down the coffee shop. I think it's just they're the elements that we're not going to replace, and so it's quite an interesting time, but also that's why you shouldn't claim to have all the answers and just try. That's why I say everyone has a little role to play. We all have a little responsibility to support things like this, and like I think how do you sit in government, right? And you think what would you do? What rules would you make? What policies would you try and enforce to fix these things? I think that's incredibly difficult. Like, how do you police big tech when you're so far behind and the regulation isn't there? And it's very, very complex, and that's why I'm not in that job. But and it's funny as well, because now you think, I feel like back in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, people would grow up and like prime minister used to be like a goal. I reckon no one today wants to be in that position.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
No, it's just changed. It's
Don't
just
think
changed.
so.
But I think
True.
that is the challenge. But ultimately, I think we've got faith in each other that we know what the right thing is, and I think that's what I'm the eternal optimist for thinking that.
Yeah.
That's why I believe this is something that can be helped, or we can raise awareness for, because people get it. It's like it's almost becoming that conversation where if you've not experienced something regarding mental health, someone that has, and I think that now we've hit that point. One, I think it's because it was probably always like that, but no one opened up, so that's a real positive. But secondly, it's like, we know the statistics, but let's not focus on the doom and gloom nature of it. Let's focus on to your point, what are the solutions to not just fix this, because again, can you fix it? But what can we do to enable more people to get the support that they need?
Yeah, I think the best way would be essentially everybody trying to do what we can do in our little to support the cause, and making sure that we become that safe space if and when needed, to ensure that someone that might not open up to somebody else might just open up to you, because it can save lives. It generally is something scary to think about it as well sometimes, when you put it and when you look at the statistics, as you said, and you look at all the negative side of the things that are happening. There's so much going on in the world, and there's so much so much of non-understanding what's going to happen next, which causes people to be anxious and which essentially leads people to make certain decisions that they wouldn't have made otherwise.
Yeah, like the world's uncertain, ambiguous, and naturally, people aren't going to feel that confident if they don't know what that future holds, and it is a bit unknown. But what I would say is that's why it takes leadership. That's why it takes people to use their platform for good. That's why it takes to like be a voice, because you are trying to you're trying to help the solution. Yeah, it's massive.
Makes sense. Let's move into the business for a bit now.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
let's-
Phew.
tell me about the biggest challenge that you faced when running that barbershop. Obviously, you mentioned that I know barbers, like a lot of the barbers, have a very much closed group of customers that they serve, and a lot of the times it's because of the communities that they're around or because of the circles they're on and so on. What's the biggest challenge apart from that you faced in the barbershop that you were running?
I think just being so different from the competition and convincing people. Like we doubled the shop that it was another carbon copy of what was around. So post COVID, when we launched the shop, we would double the price of everyone in the area intentionally, because we wanted a certain customer, and also 18,000 barbershops in the UK, fastest growing industry on the high street. I reckon 40 to 50% are fronts. And that's nothing against the barbershops, but that just means you can't enter the price competition when you're trying to be legitimate, because you can't compete. These £8 to £10 haircuts, again, it's not the barber's fault, but that's just the nature of it, right? It still can be a cash industry. And so I think the biggest challenge was ensuring that the customer service and experience justified the price, and then reaching out to the community to demonstrate that we wanted to be more than a barbershop, and it paid off. Again, we won a couple of awards. We got on the BBC. We made friends with some quite influential people. So had some influential customers. It's good, but it's always that overnight success is years in the making. And I think that the biggest challenge was actually just finding the barbers that fit the culture you want to build. Because everyone knows how it operates, so when they come from that, and you got some guy from Nottingham coming down into this West London territory and telling you, here's what you expect, and then you're not a barber either, so you're not on the shop floor actively and keeping the culture where it needs to be. You rely, then you put a heavy amount of trust on those people in the shop, and trust the feedback as well. So it's certainly been an experience. I've learned an awful lot though. I think you think you can take for granted as a customer what it takes to run a barber's, because you walk in, you get your hair cut, you booked in, so you're there on time, you leave and you go home, right? Being on the other side of it, it was a really steep learning curve, and even having those tough conversations, you're never really in a position to do that. Some people, especially if you take like the corporate route, for example, and you're working your way up the ladder, sometimes you don't get to 35, 40 before you have to sack someone. So how you handle those conversations with, again, that compassion and ensure that you're not setting them up to fail once they leave, was a massive learning curve. And I think I always, whatever the challenge was, always embraced it. Whether I felt comfortable or not is a different question. There's certainly some uncomfort, but it's like anything, you just learn by doing. Throw yourself in there and roll your sleeves up and see what happens.
Makes sense. So what's your plan with Kick the Stigma? What is it that you're trying to achieve, or what would be the goal that you're trying to reach through that brand?
That's a great question. I think, number one, I've got to be patient, because you want everything now. But I want to be a global brand that, again, is growing, but ensures you have impact, because this isn't a conversation just for the UK. This is where we have to start. And it goes back to your point when you were saying, why not women's? You can't boil the ocean. And I'm sure that there'll be, down the line, there'll be charities that are funded through our work that might help with that conversation. But ultimately, the statistics I'm focused on are the men's mental health ones. And I think that's the urgent need at the moment in society. And so that's the one I believe we can genuinely fix, or that's the one we can genuinely support with these hair products. So I think that the plan is, first off, just build the brand, get the story out there, get the products out there, get people talking about it, try and catalyze the conversation. And I think that organically we can affect change and we can make it happen. And then it's that snowball effect. I think getting used to the fact that it's not going to happen overnight goes to your point about consistency with content, consistency with message, consistency with the team. Those are all really important elements. And it would be a case of, we've got the D2C channel. So sales through the website, really smooth, great for business. And how do you keep pushing sales through that channel? But then you have to think, well, if the whole goal, like for me, it's about how fast can we scale? So what can we do to maximize our reach as soon as possible? Because ultimately, if we maximize our reach, we maximize our impact. So retail, for example, would be a great conversation to have. I think, of course, you have to make the economics work, but if you hit a Boots or you hit a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, that's where someone gave me the stat that 80% of purchases in the UK are through supermarkets. So you could be like, oh, I'm in Holland & Barrett's, or I'm in a certain shop that sounds really good, but it's still a really tiny comparison to one of the big boys. Like, it's something like 33p of every pound spent in the UK is in Tesco.
Wow.
So you take those into account and you go, right, are you going to go for a bunch of small fish or are you going to go for the whale? And I think that as we just continue pushing content out there, pushing the products out there, I had a really good conversation with a woman today, actually, who runs The Power of Men magazine, and her readership is 155,000, and we'll look at doing a feature and a piece, because it takes the mission forwards, and it's a win-win situation. And so I think that's the other thing. You could say with the Barbershop, obviously that's where it is, but this brand is not. The reason it's called Kick the Stigma is attention spans, right? You don't have time to be a mystique or add that mystery to the brand. You've got to hit people between the eyes. So Kick the Stigma is very intentional. Then the products, Mindset Matte Clay, Reset Sea Salt Spray, Headstrong Styling Powder, they're all intentional. The words of encouragement on the packaging is all intentional to make it very clear what the mission is all about. And if you want to find out more, because that's the other thing, you don't have to be a customer to be a supporter. And we're just we're fortunate by doing this. We're in a very collaborative space, so I think you don't want people to feel like you're a direct competitor. Of course you are. That's business at the end of the day. There's hair products on the shelves and they're going to want to sell. I think that the gap we've had is no one's really paired what that grooming routine does for a man's mental health. And we saw it with what the barbershop can do. And that's what led us to going for that daily routine in between the haircut and the shop. So I think there's a massive opportunity. I mean, the UK market for men's grooming is 8.2 billion. It's growing at 10% compound annual growth. So that's 14 billion by 2030. Then you think the US is 60 billion. So you take those two markets alone, and then it starts to get really interesting, because also, like, again, the mental health conversation isn't something, it's obviously culturally nuanced. So the UK conversation will be approached slightly different to maybe in the US and how they go about impacting that change. And it's certainly different in Asia and how you go about impacting that change. But if you look at that size of market, if we can just get 1%, how many lives we can change for the better, and how many projects we can fund that do the frontline work. I think that's ultimately where it's got to go, and it's inviting anyone along on the journey. So you said about the retailers getting barbershops on the wholesale side involved. So a lot of barbershops aren't affiliated to products. So how do you get them involved? How do you give them an appetite, incentivize them to push your products instead of just another one off the shelf? Like, don't mention the competitors, actually. Just you know who they are. But it's but I think that's the real growth opportunity, and you got to start small, right? And you know this from building a business. You got to start somewhere. So that's why I'm not going, oh yes, we're a global brand and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. No, we've got to start in the UK. That's where we can physically impact change. That's where I can get around and do events and things like that. But I think that's ultimately, we're in a high growing market with a really meaningful impact, and we're the first mover. So I think when you combine those three, it's a really compelling story.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the idea has a lot of legs, and the idea is essentially perfect with the awareness that you're trying to raise. And I'm sure it would help many people. Having said that, you as you said, business nowadays, I get asked a lot, by the way, what my mission is. I don't think I have it figured out. I know what I'm doing, but I don't think I specifically have a mission that I'm trying to achieve through my businesses. And it's nice to see that you have a mission, and thus you build a business around it, which is amazing. And honestly, nice work. And
thank you.
Keep up with that, and you'll be perfectly fine, I think. Having said that, obviously you have learned a lot, and you've been through a lot. You have had one of the best coaches in the world as well.
Yeah.
So a question that this leads me to is, what's one piece of advice that if you could give to your younger self, you would do that? What would that be?
Invest in Bitcoin. No, I think
that's not bad advice.
It's not bad advice. No, it would have settled my, because I think the thing that I think the advice I would have given it is be patient. I was so, I went to university in London when I was 18 and had the goal of being an investment banker, purely fueled by the fact that it was the highest paying job coming out of university. And I felt like that was my way of, one, paying my dad for the sacrifice that he made for us growing up. And secondly, it could change, a lot in my circle and me. It would just completely transform my life. And I never really considered the long hours or the stress, or because you just thought that's just something you can deal with, right? Like, that's just something I'm going to deal with, and you handle it day by day. But look at the money, and I think that's the big thing I've learned, that patience isn't a bad thing. Like, it's good, you can be impatient about things, but always keep in mind, like, don't do things for the short term gain. You've got to have that long term vision in mind. And I think that's why, again, like, building a business like this isn't because I want to make a quick buck and in a couple of years sell it. It's actually building a brand that's going to make a difference, and how do you sustainably grow that? And down the line, obviously, of course, I'd want to entertain a conversation that might involve investment or sale, but it would always, as long as you keep doing the right things, and I think staying patient because of the mission, you have to. That would be the advice, because I think that, when you're hungry, patience, and you're ambitious, and you can feel like you're always behind. I think that was the thing, like, you always feel like you're behind, and maybe there's people in your circle or people, a bit older who have done some incredible things. You go, oh, that's not me. I think I definitely fell into that trap, but it wasn't in a bad way. It fueled me to do more, but I probably could have been more patient about things.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a piece that I heard before from my guests, and as well as I firmly believe it in it as well. And when you're young and when you are pushing for growth, you don't necessarily realize how important it is to have the patience, and keeping in mind that you're not doing it for for the next 2 months to come, and it's something that you wanna build and grow, and has to be a long-term goal, it pays off a lot more than what our short-term goal essentially pays off as well.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as you said, I think I would also stress the point that you have to be ambitious. You genuinely have to push yourself above and beyond, and be hungry for the growth. But at the same time, have to balance out the two things, and have the patience to look at the long-term goal or the
Yeah,
long-term achievement that you're trying to reach.
definitely. And I think that hunger is a great thing, and that doesn't that I don't think that leaves you. You know, it doesn't leave you that ambition, but you do just get a bit more mature. You get a bit wiser,
Yeah.
and you look at things differently. With hindsight, number one, and I think secondly, you know, when you are that young, you don't have any responsibility, like apart from paying your rent and paying your bills. You know, you really can, you depending on how much you want to sacrifice, you can really go after what you want. I think for me, I always told myself the goal was money and the goal was, you know, investment banking, but it was a bit deeper than that. And I think when I accepted that as well, it kind of took the pressure off. And I thought that, you know, right, yeah, you're not where you thought you might be, but that's not a bad thing. It's like, in fact, that the path you've taken that you didn't plan for has paid off. Like running a barbershop at 24, 25 was not in the plan, you know. But what it's done for me, personal growth, professional growth, like the doors it's got me into, the opportunity that it's created. Again, it wouldn't Kick the Stigma wouldn't have happened without that. So I think you can always look at those things and see, what did you take from it, what did you learn, how did you develop? Because ultimately, the Adam of 5 years ago wouldn't have been able to run this business today. I needed those years to get to where it is today, and then have that confidence to do it, right? Because
Definitely.
I think now I feel in a very confident and assertive place where, yeah, this is gonna happen, and it's down to me. But I have no doubt I'll make it work, and I'll need help along the way, you know. But I think, yeah, if you'd asked me that question 5 years ago and you go, oh, how would you have been? I probably would have made some poor choices.
Fair enough. Yeah, makes sense. I can see that, like, throughout everybody's entrepreneurial journey, or throughout everybody's journey that started a business of their own, one of the common things essentially is that where they have gone through certain phases, and after they have gone out from those stages or phases, they realize how important they were for them to be where they are now.
Yeah.
And we should appreciate that. And that's
And do you know what's interesting, Hamza, is, you know, it's similar to the leadership piece with entrepreneurship as well. People think, they look at the Musks and the Steve Jobs and they think there's one way to do it. There isn't. You know, your approach to running your business is going to be different to my approach running my business. Doesn't mean it's a negative or a positive. It's just your style versus my style. And like, I didn't, like, you think, oh, those kids I was always an entrepreneur, you know, from 10 years old, I was selling sweets in the playground. And when I was 14, I did a car washing business. And that's a very nice story for whoever's telling it, but that's not my journey. Doesn't mean I can't be it. Doesn't mean I can't be an entrepreneur. Doesn't mean I can't go back to the corporate world if you have to. It's just, and I think when you get really comfortable that your approach is your approach, then I think that just takes such a massive weight off.
how do you get to that mindset? What is it that shifted to get you to get yourself to that mindset? Basically, what was that thing that triggered it?
Honestly, well, I was saying to my boss, Rene Carayol, world-renowned executive coach, like phenomenal mentor and boss. And what's great is we all have those moments of self-doubt, and it's why those words of encouragement again are on the packaging, because I think in those moments when you don't quite believe in yourself, he was there to pick me up and tell me I'm on the right track and tell me that you did the right thing, and then also, you know, point out where the areas for development are. Because it's nice, of course, like family and friends were great because they were supportive in the way that they are, in the sense, like, you know, they don't know the context of the work, but they're like, you know, you're doing well and keep going. But because he was there next to me, but in the context, like he could help me and guide me on, here's what you should think about doing differently, or this is, and sometimes he'd just drop you in it. But it was great. Like you'd wake up but you'd have a text in the morning that just says, Adam, like, really good job yesterday. Like, you made the right call. It was a tough decision. How are you doing with it? And I think that's what, it doesn't come overnight, but I just started to really believe that I could be me and still achieve what I wanted to achieve. I think I felt when I was a bit younger that I had to change who I was in order to get what I wanted. And that's certainly not the right approach, or that's not going to sustain you, right? Because you can't not be authentic for a long time. You know, at some point it's going to catch up to you. So I think having him around, and obviously with the job he is, it's exceptional, but I owe an awful lot to him for giving me that encouragement.
You know, the authenticity is essentially, I tell that to a lot of our clients as well that get into the content game. Is the honest truth and is the easiest thing to understand is the fact that you can't fake personality. You can't fake what you're saying for years to come. And the same thing with yourself. Like, if you know who you are and you know what skill sets you have, and you should double down on your skills rather than looking for your weaknesses and, you know, or how they say, cry about your weaknesses. just focus on the strengths, essentially.
And it's liberating, right?
It is.
Like when you get to that place where you go, you know, like, of course you're still going to curate, you still want to develop, you still want to learn, but when you get to that place of like, I'm okay doing my approach or my way, it's liberating. Like, you just take all that kind of outside opinion away, and you don't worry about it, and you don't think about it, and that is such a nice place to be. Because, and that's also again why we're here to support men's mental health through Kick the Stigma, because a lot of people still feel that way, and whether that's the environment they're in, whether that's the workplace they're in, whether that's just how they've grown up. But I think that's another contributing factor to what we talk about.
Makes sense. So, you know, you mentioned your mentor, and what's the biggest lesson that you learned from him? Or what's the biggest thing that you feel like he has that's making him one of the best mentors or one of the best coaches, of executive coaches in the world?
That's a great question. I mean, we need another hour to write down all the lessons that I've learned from him. But I think the big one is he's a coach for life. So it's such an intimate relationship at the top. When you think that person they've got £1 billion acquisition and it's falling through, and it's Sunday night, it's 3 a.m, they can't sleep, he's there for them. Like, he says, like, you know, he goes, I'm the executive coach for you. It's my job to be there for you. So when they have that call and there's no one else to turn to, because they can't go to their executive team because they're all worried. So you as the leader have to display that strength in those times if they're a bit uncertain, like we talked about. You want to turn to maybe your partner, but they might not quite grasp just the intensity of what you're talking about. And you might want to talk through the more tactical elements of the deal. So that's where Rene sits as the coach, but it's like he's there for you. And what again he can't fake is he genuinely cares. You know, he's not a coach because it pays well. He could have retired, 25 years ago. So his executive experience he was part of the Europe's biggest management buyout. So it was IPC Media. They bought the company for 870 million. Sold it for 1.1 billion, and he could have rode off into the sunset, but there's something about him that just wants to help others, and then he got into coaching, and it's by accident, right? No, I don't think anyone intentionally. It's not a qualification. I'd need to get that out there. People think coaching is this qualification that I've gone on this course and now I'm a coach, and it's not the case. Like when an executive's got a burning issue. Like we say, so let's say an AI piece of technology comes out and you think it's going to disrupt 50% of your workforce. that's a really intense thing. But you don't need someone, if you like, I need 15 minutes because time's precious, and the coach wants to take notes. You don't trust that person. Like, why are you taking notes? This is really sensitive information. And I actually just want you to be a sounding board. I don't necessarily need you to fix my issue. And I think taking that approach that the coaching isn't remedial, it's 24/7, and it's just accelerating what you do and then looking after who those people are when maybe people aren't quite looking after themselves. So yeah, I think
sounds like a great person, to be honest. And
well, he's
haven't heard that
68.
from
You know
yeah.
what I mean as well. Like he could honestly like, and he still does it, and he's still at the top of the game, and it's just amazing to get that backing and that trust and that exposure. That because again, he didn't have to take a chance on me. I've worked for him for 8 years, so I joined him when I was 20, and he didn't have to take that chance on me. There was people definitely more qualified that would have loved to have worked for him, but he was kind enough, I guess. He saw something in me, or saw the attitude that he probably had back when he was my age, and I thought I'll give him a chance. And I think, again, we talk about that workplace environment, enabling an environment where people can thrive and make mistakes, so they desire for success, don't fear failure. Like it's really crucial because everyone makes mistakes. But with what's great is he enables you to get better, and he's got his arm around you. And sometimes the arm isn't around; it's the hairdryer, but certainly that arm is coming around more often than not. And it's phenomenal because it changes how you approach things as well, right? It's like it takes nothing for a candle to light another candle. So him coaching me, then I try and do my bit for if other people want coaching, like when people come to me and say, oh, I kind of want to be a coach or I want to be a speaker, you have to give them the honest feedback because otherwise they won't develop. You can't blow smoke up their ass. You need to tell people that, but it's just how you use language, right? You don't say, that's really bad. You say, I think there's an opportunity with this bit or that bit, or have you maybe tried doing this? But I've learned all that off Rene. And so I think that's it's like paying it forwards.
Makes sense. That's nice way to put it. A question that I asked to all of my guests at the end of the session is, if there was one piece of advice that you could leave the audience with, what would that be? I know you already told me about the patience and we talked about it, but if there's anything else that you can think of.
I want to do two.
Go for it.
I think regret is worse than risk. So if you sat there and you're thinking, don't I? Ask yourself the question, will you regret not doing it? If the answer is yes, then, you've made your decision. But I think the second one is practice makes permanent. And that's a Rene one. But I think that's so, practice makes perfect. It's just not possible. No one's going to be perfect, and you should strive for high standards, but never perfection if it's going to get in the way. But practice makes permanent. The more you do it, the better you get. And just trust that, because practice makes perfect. That's unattainable, and that can take you the other way. But practice makes permanent, I think, can resonate with a lot of people.
That's a nice way to put it. I didn't think of it like that. I genuinely...
No, he's got some wisdom.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's brilliant.
That is brilliant. Perfect, Adam. Thank you so much for coming on this show, and thank you all for watching and listening. I'll see you in the next one.